Hello, 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 hello. Ah. Okay. Too loud. Okay, we're good. We're good. Okay, we're good. Can you hear me? Testing. Sibilance. Sibilance.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Filled up on way too much chips and guac.
Oh yeah.
Very nice. And we went to the Bar the Deca for a while.
One more.
Yes. And I'm not going to touch it. That's my laser pointer? Actually, I might use that.
Slide, if you fancy one more kind of just go for it.
Oh, okay.
It just,
great.
yeah, it just says at the very top, and the slash. Yeah, that's all it has.
Well, super. Thank you so much. Oh, that's great. This is the longest 11 minutes. It's that bewitching sort of hour. It can take forever. No, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Yeah. Oh, that's all. Actually, when I taught every fall, Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the annual meeting. Before we get underway this morning, I just want to once again thank local arrangements and the University of Washington and Penny and outgoing President Tim Kelly, outgoing President Tim and incoming President Bonnie Geldemacher, who is also the chair, as some of you know, of the Education Committee, because this has been a wonderful meeting as usual. And so, and as far as the last presentation yesterday, Kim Osidis, who talked about sleuthing, not stalking. Many of you have asked about extra handouts, and we do have a few extra handouts for that program. Sue Luddington has put some over there on the corner, if any of you are interested in some of the sites that she reviewed for you. Our next speaker
got his BA at Loyola University in New Orleans, his JD at University of Idaho, and then, like so many law library directors before him, went to UW and got a library degree. And starting his law librarianship career as a reference librarian at Widener, he then moved on to Creighton, where he spent 10 years as a reference librarian and legal research instructor. In 2007, he was hired as associate director at Gonzaga University Law Library, ultimately becoming director in 2013. He has published numerous articles, many of which are about legal research, and now here today, this morning, to talk to us about getting our own articles in legal research published is Patrick Charles.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thanks for showing up here. It was about 15 minutes ago, and it was the longest 15 minutes. It's that right before you present there where it just, time just stands still. And you just want to throw up. So fortunately, I didn't do that. So thanks for showing up. I have to do a big shout out to Kim. That was a great presentation yesterday. I really enjoyed that. It was also a little bit disturbing, too. Disturbing on how much information's out there and disturbing on how much you know. And why do you do this? But that was a very good presentation. And actually a little bit of a segue into, you should write an article about this. And actually that's a lib guide right there. So you could sort of take that thing and just make it into a whole bunch of other different things, which you probably have already done that too. Okay, so how to get published, and the most important thing here is with minimal effort here. I should also call this like low-hanging fruit here, because I'm a big believer in that. I have to say right off the bat, I'm not very smart. I'm not a good writer at all. I'm 10 pounds overweight, and my cholesterol is also really, really high. So why am I here? I want to talk about getting things published, and I'm kind of like a tick. I burrow in there a little bit, and then people are comfortable with me after that, and I sort of get my way sort of in a weird passive-aggressive sort of way. But I've also had a lot of other people to help me do that too. So I've glommed onto people who actually, well, it's kind of like that tick thing, a good host. And so I've been doing that for quite some time, and I want to tell you people how to do that too, if you're interested in having things published. I said I'm not very smart, and I said I'm not a very good writer. I'm also not like a thinker or anything like that. I tend to be very, very practical on things. I've been teaching legal research for about 17 years now. I'm a big fan and believer in secondary sources, and especially law review articles. But if you look at a lot of law review articles, they're kind of navel-gazing things. Nobody really cares, and they're probably not going to use those. At least they don't. No lawyers really care. Academics care because they have to get tenure and that sort of thing. So I'm one of the faculty advisors to the Gonzaga Law Review, and I've been pushing for years. Come on, we're not Harvard, we're not University of Washington. Little shout out there to University of Washington. We're Gonzaga, and why don't you write practical articles that actually people can use? That's a different presentation. But nonetheless, I'm kind of into, hey, somebody might read it and they might actually use it there. You can't really say that about some things coming out of the Yale Law Journal and some of those other things. Completely useless stuff other than, I guess they're advancing the law, but I don't care about that. But I want you guys, if you're so interested, to write practical articles there. And it's target-rich territory out there, especially if you look at the right publications. First, I want to ask a couple of questions. Who's actually written articles and book chapters and that sort of thing? Okay, who's interested in writing articles and that sort of thing? Okay, all those people who raise their hand first, just leave, because I'm going to focus on the second people there. Through the years, I've published a bunch of different things, but they've been in bar journals, or I did this in law school. I wasn't interested in the practice of law. I really wasn't interested in going to law school, but I ended up going. But I had a professor who I really, really liked, Mark Anderson, at the University of Idaho. And the guy's funny, he's engaging, he's interesting, and that sort of thing. I took every single class he had to offer. Antitrust. Because it was funny and engaging and that sort of thing. I'm really not sure where I'm going with this story here, but I just had to say that. Let's start with this. Okay, how to get published. This is our little roadmap here. Ideas for articles and books, then we're going to look at the types of periodicals, then we're going to deal with some of the meat of the thing there, contacting editors, dealing with publications and that sort of thing. And then also writing the article or book chapter or book or whatever. Ideas for articles. I have to step back a little bit and say, when I went to the University of Washington here for law librarianship, there was a couple of people like Penny and Mary Wisner who wrote a lot of stuff, and especially Mary Wisner, who, is she here? She's just written an enormous amount of stuff, and it's all practical type stuff, and I was like, wow, that's pretty good. So I kind of made a goal for myself of, I was going to have things published in sort of the big publications there. Law Library Journal, Legal Reference Services Quarterly, AALL Spectrum, some bar publications. I'm a member of the Oregon State Bar Association, so I was like, oh, I'm going to have the Oregon State Bar Bulletin there. And then I was thinking about maybe some other things that were out there too, like, you know, maybe be really ambitious and do a book chapter or something like that. So those were my goals. And like my wife says, you don't get fat overnight. It takes a long time to do that. So I was going to say, hey, I'll look at the long picture here and, you know, maybe one article a year there. And they don't have to be long articles. They don't have to be scholarly articles. They can be these little things in Spectrum or bar publications and that type of thing. And the other beautiful thing about it is most of these things, like the Northwest Lawyer, which is the Washington State Bar Association publication, or when I was in Nebraska, it was the Nebraska Lawyer. Boy, these are great titles here, huh? Nebraska Lawyer, Northwest Lawyer, that sort of thing. Oregon State Bar Bulletin. They come out 10 times a year or 12 times a year. They're dying to have articles there. So it's not like it's super competitive. And I'm sorry, what was that? Oh, yeah, WestPac News. And I'll talk about newsletters and that type of thing, too. They're just dying to have those articles. And so it's really easy to get those things. You just contact them, tell them, hey, I have this idea for an article there, and, boom, you're there. The other thing that I was interested in doing, and it's kind of a shame that this is just online now, but Perspective, Teaching Legal Research and Writing. Who's familiar with this? Great, great publication there. I've had a bunch of articles published in this, mostly because I think Mary Hotchkiss felt sorry for me, and I was just hanging around a lot. And so much so that now Beth Edinger, I think, is the editor of it, and they asked me to be on the editorial board for that. And it's like, geez, the irony of that. So I'm supposed to go out there and sort of get people to get articles in this, and that's part of this whole presentation here is, hey, if you want an article, here's a good thing to do. They're online now. But these folks are just dying for articles there. As I said, I'm not very smart, I'm not a good writer, but I'm pretty good at coming up with ideas. And here are some really good ideas for articles. As I said, I'm really a practical person. Legal research subjects. I'm a reference librarian at heart there. Now, I'm the director there, but I'm a reference librarian, and the University of Washington trains good reference librarians. Didn't know anything about technical services, but I'm a good reference librarian there. And I teach legal research. So I know a lot about that. And I taught first years for 10 years. It was their first semester. It was a standalone legal research class. So to sort of quote Bill Clinton there, I felt their pain. I understood what they were going through. And so legal research subjects, really good subjects, especially for you public services folks that are out there. But if you're technical services folks, which, as the associate director and then now as the director there, I had to deal with technical services. So I learned a lot of things. And we weren't necessarily doing things correctly there. So I had to become up to speed on that sort of thing. So technical services, you just wait here. What have you done in your library? Well, those are the ones for technical services right there. And, you know, I remember Jonathan Franklin a few years ago saying the look at me, look what I did type of article. Well, those are useful sometimes. We just hired a reference librarian at Gonzaga, and I wanted to do it correctly there. So what did I do? I looked up articles on, you know, how to deal with bringing in some people and then making those bad phone calls that are like, I'm sorry, you didn't get the job. That's always difficult to do, but I actually found some articles on dealing with that and what are the right things to do. And deep down in my heart, I knew what the right thing to do was, but I just wanted some validation from some other things there. So that's a good subject sort of thing. You know, what you've done in your library. How about good or bad library practices? I had the benefit of working at Creighton for 10 years, and it was a well-run operation. Since then, I've had some very good directors, and now that I'm the director, but I see that some other libraries aren't necessarily as well run as some. Articles about pointing out the good things that you do or you've experienced, you can kind of be nameless on the whole thing, those are good fodder for articles there. You can think of things. This is the thing that I've sort of gotten a little into, and it's sort of my own geeky librarian interest here. Library or legal history subjects there. I had something published in the Spectrum that was like 10 obsolete legal research tools, and one of them was that National Reporter System Blue Book. We were also talking about in it Mosaic. Remember the Mosaic browser? Yeah, oh, that's right. Ooh, the internet, you know, pictures and that type of thing. You know, people like to look at that, and it was funny because Penny and I were talking about this beforehand, and she didn't think that too many people were interested in it. And I disagreed. I thought a lot of people were interested in that. I actually got people who sent me letters and emails. I actually had a letter, like a letter. The Postal Service, somebody said, I really enjoyed that. Okay. And then the other thing that I did recently, which actually started out as a library display, I was doing some research on some law reviews, and I stumbled upon some old law reviews that the publishers used to have advertisements in them. And this was in the 30s and 40s, mostly the 40s. And I'm a big World War II history buff. I don't dress up in that stuff, but yeah, that wouldn't be good. But I'm really interested in that type of thing. And I noticed that they were World War II legal themes in the legal publishing themes, which was sort of weird. But that was when, you know, total war and the war effort and the home front and all that sort of stuff. So I got a lot of these images actually off of Hein Online because they were a little bit better there. And then I printed them out and I put them up as a display there. And then I thought, well, heck, why don't I just put something, you know, an article on it, posted it on SSRN, and then the next thing I know, I went to WAWL Spectrum online and they posted it there. You know, is it advancing, you know, legal research or the academy or anything? No, it isn't. It was more of a vanity type thing on my part. But, you know, that's kind of interesting, and that's a good idea. Especially if you sort of struggle with things, that's a good way to sort of dip your toe in the water there, and then you can go from there and do things that are a little bit more substantive and maybe even, dare I say, scholarly there. Which kind of leads us to you know, our legal publishers here. I'm in that rarefied air as a director there, so budgets and all that sort of thing. I love the publishers, but I also hate the publishers too, especially when it comes to billing and all that sort of thing and how much things cost, and sometimes they're a little too expensive there. We can be nice, but we could also advocate, you know, let's do some better practices on these. And I know that WAWL does that in regards to crib and that sort of thing. But it's not a bad idea to sort of go on some of these publications here and say, hey, I really like that. I like that, you know, new Bloomberg product, or I like that new Walters Kluwer product or something like that. But you can also say, does it have to cost so much? But those are some different ideas that you can kind of come up with. Types of periodicals. I kind of talked about this. We've got law library publications, and you know that list, that sort of bucket list I had for my career, there's a lot that's out there. Law Library Journal and Legal Reference Services Quarterly, they tend to be a little more scholarly there. You got to have footnotes and that sort of thing, and they tend to be pretty long. And, it takes a time investment and that sort of thing. Fortunately, they're peer edited, so you don't necessarily have to deal with student editors on those whole things. But nonetheless, those are the law library publications. The lighter, less scholarly things tend to be, AA, LL Spectrum, then also Spectrum Online, newsletters that are out there too. And newsletters are a good way of sort of, as I said, dipping your toe in the water and kind of getting started on some of those things. Legal research and writing publications, as I said, there's perspectives there. What's that one for the legal writing one? It's Scribner or something like that. One of the Scribe, that's it, bingo, thank you. That's a pretty good one because, the relationship between librarians and legal writing and that sort of thing. A little bit more ambitious, books and book chapters. When I was at Creighton, there was a reference librarian there that I replaced, a wonderful guy named Paul Hill. And Paul he retired and he was a little bit older, but he was a bicycle enthusiast. And he raced bikes. He's 65 years old and he's racing bikes and doing all that sort of stuff. And he got involved with this publisher from Tucson, Arizona called Lawyers and Judges Press. It's a real small press. And they actually started out selling for personal injury lawyers, those sort of skeletons and exhibits and that sort of thing. And then they morphed into litigation-oriented materials. And Paul Hill wrote a book about bicycle accident reconstruction. And they had an engineer do the first half of the book. And then Paul Hill, the reference librarian, what he would do is he'd do a survey of all the case law about bicycle accidents and all sorts of things like that. Well, Paul retired, so he said, hey, Pat, maybe you should write some stuff for lawyers and judges. And, I gave it a shot. Now, that ended up a disaster. It's sort of like the Hindenburg there. And I ended up not doing it. But I know that Kay Andrus, the director there now, he's been writing for them. So if you're ambitious like that, there's a lot of books and book chapters to do. Just find all the different publishers that are out there. And one thing that I sort of have in the back of my pocket that I want to do if I had the time, and I really shouldn't say this because somebody's going to steal my idea and then take, money out or food out of the mouths of my children there. Everybody see right there for West Academic? There's the short and happy guides. Anybody familiar with those things? Actually should walk over. Here they are. They're brand new. And I'm not plugging for them, by the way. But they have one. This is Short and Happy Guide to Being a Law Student. They have one for property law. They have one for con law. They have for all the first-year ones. They don't have a legal research one. And I've actually contacted them about it. And I said, I'm interested in doing this. And they keep contacting me back, and I keep blowing them off. But I really want to do this. I don't want anybody to steal my idea, but what am I going to do about it if somebody steals my idea? We also have a professor at Gonzaga. Scott Burnham's the guy's name. And he's a UCC guy, sales guy, and that sort of thing. He's written those Glannon guides, some of those study aids. But what he did for contracts was he did one of those, an idiot's guide or a dummy's guide or whatever those things for contract law. And that's brilliant because, those are everywhere. But for legal materials, it's like, oh, wow, there's kind of a growth market there. And they sell a lot of books. He told me how much money he made off that thing. More than his treatises that he writes, if you can believe that. So there's a lot of target-rich area here for books. I was also talking to somebody at Gonzaga who's an editor for Matthew Bender. And she's been trying to get people to write articles for her, or chapters for her treatise. Now, it tends to be really substantive, and I don't necessarily think it's something that, or maybe it is for law librarians to do that type of thing, but I mean, she's jonesing for people to write chapters for her. So it's not as hard as you think. And then the last one are law reviews and legal periodicals, like University of Washington Law Review or the FSU Law Review, that sort of thing. Those are a little bit harder to get sort of legal research subjects in there, but they do publish those types of things. And if you put something together that's really good, they'll publish those things. Also, you got to think, when I was in law school, there was like 180 ABA accredited law schools. Now there's like 210 or something like that. They've all got journals. Some have more than one. They need articles too. So, if you want to get the Harvard Law Review, well, good luck with that. But sort of some of your, I shouldn't say the word lesser, but some of the other ones out there, try it. What's the worst that could happen? They could say no. The best that could happen is, oh yeah, we're going to publish that for you there. And then you'll go through the whole editorial process and that type of thing. So those are the different types of periodicals or books that you can go through. The next step in the process, contacting editors or publishers or that type of thing. If you're going the non-law review legal journal route, it's pretty easy there. On most of these publications here, especially the non-scholarly ones, just read the first few pages there, the publication requirements and guidelines there. What I've done, though, is I read through that, and then I'll send them an email, especially the folks at the Northwest Lawyer or the Washington State Bar Association publication. And I've had like 3 or 4 articles for that. And I just said, hey, I got a great idea for this thing. What do you think? And they either give you the green light or they say, no, we don't want to do that. Now, it'll take a few months because, they put everything together. So if you contact them in October, it's probably going to be somewhere in March that it's going to get published. But, give them a buzz and shoot them an email and see what they say about that whole thing. Working with them. I've had some really good experiences working with publishers and editors, and I've had some really bad experiences. Some are real hands-on and do a good job. Some are real hands-off and do a good job, and some are just really bad. And I've dealt with those, and I'm not going to name any names on those types of things. Contact them, see what they say, work with them. My opinion about doing these things, if they have suggestions, I'm going to trust them on that. I'm not thin-skinned about things. If people have red ink all over things, well then fine. I don't take it personally. As I said, I'm not a very good writer, so I need all the help I can get there. Writing the article and other thoughts there. If you suffer from writer's block, this too shall pass. Especially if you have a deadline there. That's a very good motivator there. And also fear of failure is a pretty good motivator. Some of the little tips and tricks that I have, find someone, glom onto someone who's a good editor. I've had people I work with, and my wife, who was an English major, she looks at everything. And she's vicious. Partly because it's me. But she will go after things with a fiery red pen, and that's okay. I've also had the benefit, and I feel like I'm name dropping here, but Linda Kawaguchi has read every bad thought that I've had in regards to things, and I've given her some crap too through the years. But she's always cleaned it up for me. When I started writing articles at Creighton, I had a student who was the editor of the Law Review, and he was roughly my age. He was in the service before, and then he went to law school. And he was a really good guy, had a great sense of humor, and I became friends with him. And he was a real gunner, and he worked for a pretty good law firm in Omaha, and he volunteered for everything. And the Nebraska Lawyer has a guest editor every issue. And he wanted to, get his name out there and do all that sort of thing. Well, as the guest editor, he had to go out and get people to write articles. So he had to go out there and, churn it up there. And he always went to me. So that was my in. And I think I wrote like 8 different articles, which was really nice. And also he edited the heck out of them too. So he made them look presentable and that type of thing. If you can get someone like that, then you're in. You're golden right there. And then good things happen after that, which, as I said, Mary Hotchkiss just felt sorry for me on a lot of those perspective articles. So she just kind of cleaned them up, and boom, I got like 3 or 4 there. Some of the other things that I've done, another trick is you can write articles that are the gift that keep on giving. I got interested in jury verdicts and settlement information like LRP and that type of thing, and Northwest jury verdicts and some of those things. And in fact, in Omaha, I wasn't paid that much, so I moonlighted for that LRP company where I was the person who got all the jury verdicts and settlement information for Douglas County, Nebraska, which is Omaha there. And they paid $25 a verdict there, and that's how I sent my kids to Catholic elementary school. So it was all in the back of personal injury verdicts and employment verdicts there. But that's a great article because, you know, attorneys want to know about that stuff. It's useful information, especially for those employment law attorneys and personal injury attorneys, both on the plaintiff side and the insurance defense side. They want to know how much something's worth. Somebody loses a hand, you know, what's a jury in Omaha, Nebraska, as opposed to Council Bluffs, Iowa? And there's a big difference. So I wrote one for the Nebraska lawyer on personal injury, and that turned into one on employment law. And then when I moved to Washington, I did one for Washington State. And then I did one for Idaho and the Idaho Advocate. And then I did one for the Oregon State Bar Bulletin there. It was like the loaves and fishes thing there. It just kept going. And the beautiful thing about it was print resources and electronic resources. Now, a lot of those jury publishers, they're kind of mom and pop operations there, and they keep getting bought up. So you write an article, and it's essentially time-bombed. In 2 years, it's obsolete. So you got to write a new article there. It's the gift that keeps on giving there. Another good article idea, legislative history. We had that great presentation by all those folks from BYU and Utah and that sort of thing, where it said young associates don't know anything about legislative history. Well, write an article about legislative history, how to compile legislative history in your state. I've done that for Nebraska. I think I did one for Washington. You know, it's easy peasy right there. You should get those all the time. New databases that come out, what they have. You know, you can do those types of things. So they're pretty easy right there. The next thing, I got off on a little tangent there, but I got to fill up 45, 50 minutes. Proofreading. This is the thing I struggle with the most. It is my cross to bear, as we Catholics say. If I have a good editor, they usually catch that thing, but you know, I start writing things and I know about it and I start seeing mirages and it's like, oh yeah, that's what that means. But then I let things sit, marinate for a little while, and then I come back to them and I read them out loud actually. And that's when I catch things. But you know, just these little sort of things can make or break you, because I've dealt with some editors at some publications, they don't read stuff, which is appalling. But I've had some situations where things have blown up on me. And I don't like that because you just don't look good there. So proofreading is important. The next thing, networking. As I said, you know, you keep going back and doing things and then, you know, people read about, oh yeah, like they know what they're doing there. And that leads to other things. So you can build your way up on some of those things. That's how I think I got that Perspectives editorial board thing. They just were tired of me hanging around that it's like, you might as well join the whole thing. The other thing is be practical about your articles there. Have a practical subject. If you're a scholarly type person, okay, that's fine. I'm not that breed of cat right there. That doesn't work for me. I'm really quite practical, as I said. And I also look at it like, hey, if I publish something in the Nebraska Lawyer or the Oregon Bar Bulletin, chances are I'm going to have a lot more people reading this than if I had it published in a law review or something like that. It's kind of sad to say that, but these are quick and easy type things, and people do read them. Now they might say, oh, that's terrible, but you know, they're a quick and easy read. It's kind of like People magazine. It's, oh yeah, I can go through that pretty quickly there. Some of the other things. I've actually posted a bunch of things on SSRN. I'm sure you can do that. You get a little bit of buzz and you get some hits there. I've also had a couple of like blogs kind of say, oh wow, here's this good article, and then you see like, you get an avalanche of a bunch of things there. Now for SSRN, I like it. I like it as a legal researcher because you can find a bunch of free articles there and they're in PDF. I know a lot of professors who sort of have it as a fetish there, how many hits they got and how many downloads and that type of thing. I don't really care too much about that. But it is one way of getting things out. And then also when it's accepted for publication, you can flip it over there and say, oh yeah, it's in the Harvard Law Review or whatever, or the AALL Spectrum. It's just getting you a little bit more exposure on the whole thing. I haven't, posted on anything else there. There was a time when I had things listed on my faculty page where I had links to articles, but I just stopped doing that because I just stopped caring in regards to those. I thought it had enough exposure out there on some of the other things that are there. Any questions? I know I'm sort of a little short on this whole thing, but yeah. Oh, yeah.
Can you wait for a mic?
Oh.
Oh, got one close? Good. Is it green? Hello?
I don't hear you. I will do that.
Thanks.
Quick question. What about the idea of writing, I guess like from the flip side of what you've been talking about, just getting some stuff written. Let me back up. Sometimes the way to get out of writer's block is write something. Just write just whatever comes to mind, because it's a lot easier to look at it as an editor, a week or so later. And so it can just get you, putting stuff down on the page. What about the idea of doing something like that, and then just, the fact that there's so many publications so hungry for content? Have you ever gone about it that way, where you just get something written enough that you can actually sort of start shopping it, maybe not even in some of the publications that you're talking about, but just looking at libraries generally, because then, the university opens up. Probably still something that has cachet in our profession, to be in just anything in the library world. Have you had experience doing it that way, as opposed to calling the editor and sort of talking with them about, a possible idea that you might turn into a deadline and then an article?
I'm supposed to repeat that question.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. I forgot. I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah.
Your mic works.
Overcoming writer's block and just writing things sort of stream of consciousness there to sort of boil that down a little bit. And actually, that's a good idea. And I've done that, too, because I have struggled with putting together ideas. And that's where my wife and other people have sort of come in. I'll just write it, and it's not good. Sort of what I was saying earlier, it marinates a little bit there. And then I go back to it, and it's like, well, I can work with this. I could put this back together. I remember one professor talking about SSRN. It's the database of half-baked ideas. You just keep adding to it, and eventually it works out pretty well. That's actually a really good strategy. And, ultimately it kind of goes back to, why are we doing this? Is it to share knowledge? Yeah, we're librarians, for goodness sakes. We want to show people how to do things. It's kind of like, we're not necessarily going to do the fishing for you, but we'll teach you how to fish. And we'll also provide manuals on how to fish and that type of thing. So we're in there in sharing knowledge. Some people, I'm on sort of a weird long-term contract, tenure track type thing. Writing's not a requirement for me, although I have all the criteria of professional development and that type of thing. I just like writing. So I've had to do it for, my survival. I've also done it for resume padding too. Now that's a little bit crass, but we are getting paid for this, so we have to do things that way. Some of it is for prestige, and I've worked with a lot of people who have a much better pedigree than I do in regards to where I went to school. and that type of thing. So I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder in regards to things, and it's like, well, you know, I'm not that bright, but I think I could do that. Sometimes it's ended up in failure, but other times it's been like, oh, I'll take that as a win there. So sometimes we do it for showing off too. But ultimately, back to yours, which you know, I know what you were saying there. Sometimes you just write things there, and then you can pick up the pieces in regards to it and go, okay, I've gotten over this writer's block here, and then I actually have something to work with, and I can sort of resurrect that or resuscitate it there, and you actually have a pretty good thing to work with there. The other thing that I've sort of learned from this whole thing is I actually know quite a bit. I might not have the confidence, but I remember I had to do something, and about 6 months ago I wrote it, and then I forgot about it. And then I was doing Google Desktop, and I found this document, and I'm like, hey, wow, that's a great thing right there. I can't believe I wrote that. It was so good there. But, you know, coming back to things is actually a pretty good idea. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks.
Any other questions? Yes.
Have you ever worked with a co-author? And what do you think would be the positive and negatives of working with a co-author? I have been working with a co-author, and his expectations of me are rarely met in terms of time frame.
That's a good question. I have worked with co-authors. I've worked with co-authors on little articles, and I worked with a co-author on, actually co-authors on, in Nebraska, we, at Creighton, we wrote for Mickey's LexisNexis, the Legal Research Guide to Nebraska. And it was Ann Kitchell, Kay Andrus, Troy Johnson, and then myself, and we divided it up into, I had, I think, the Constitution and statutory codes, and then we farmed it out to secondary and all that sort of thing. So I've dealt with co-authors there, and then I've also dealt with, as I said, co-authors in sort of shorter things. I think I've been extremely fortunate, knock on wood, that I've dealt with people who sort of thought like I did. In the back there, Linda and I have a bunch of articles. We have a weird relationship. We've known each other for a long, long period of time. She got me involved. We went to law school together. She got me involved in law librarianship. She said, hey, why don't you do this? I'm like, yeah, that's not a bad idea. Yeah, my wife, I was dating, well, I was stalking, actually sleuthing is a better word. And Linda just said, for God's sakes, just ask her out. So she's responsible for that. She's also responsible for my current job, too. When she got the directorship at Gonzaga, she needed an associate director and called me up. So those three things. And then when she left as the director, she gave me her hot tub, too. So, so a lot of things that are important in my life. But we're weirdly like brother and sister in regards to things. And we actually think alike. And it's been very easy working with her on that, and then also all those people I worked with at Creighton. It was very easy working with them. I've had a couple of other experiences where it wasn't so good, and stronger personalities and egos. That's real hard to do. I'm generally pretty open to suggestions on things. So if, you know, it was somebody slighted me or like, oh, you're definitely on the disadvantage. The guy who did the keynote yesterday, which was very entertaining and very informative, he was talking about, you know, who goes first on an article. And I think there's like 4 Big Bang episodes about that. But in any event, to me, that's not a big deal. I don't care. But I can, so I'm kind of like, okay, yeah, I can take that. But I can see situations, and I've sort of bumped up against it a little bit. But you just got to work through it. One thing nice about being law librarians is we're open to suggestions there. Law professors, maybe not so much. So a little different in regards to that. But that's a good question. I hope that answered that. I'm glad you're asking questions.
Another source I can suggest for writing is many of us, at least a few times, if not several times in our career, will end up giving presentations at conferences such as this, AALL, Cali, etc. And when you become familiar enough with the topic that you're presenting on it, quite often you can expand that into an article in some place. Corinne's work on legal research, no doubt, will take of attorneys could be turned, well, once they're done with whatever their next survey is, will turn into an article. I expect to see Patrick's write-up of this session turn into an article in Spectrum next year. So think about things that you're already working on, and you can just, I realize it's not the same as long form. Lord knows I can't write long form without having a brilliant inspiration for it. Even then it doesn't look that good. But think about things you're already doing in other formats and turning them into written projects.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, that's a great point on it, and that's why that's an article right there on the sleuthing, and actually all of these programs, with the exception of this one because it's just so bad, are articles that you can put together. But what I'm going to put together, we actually had a book thief at our university, and thank God it wasn't the law library where the guy hid it a lot, but it was the undergraduate library. But the law library was involved in the whole thing. This guy was a former student who took a lot of books. A lot of books. We recovered 1,500 books that were worth over $140,000. That's a lot. He had done this over a long period of time, but come to find out, that actually happens quite a bit. And there was an East Coast law school that recently had that problem, and my dean, on the dean's list there, and my dean got it, and this person said, has anybody ever had an experience with book thieves? If you could, contact me off list. And my dean contacted her and said, talk to my library director. It's an interesting subject. We recovered all those books, by the way. But it was a really interesting thing, and I think that happens quite a bit. So, experiences that you come across. Now, for some people, I hesitated to say how much money we lost, because that's not a good reflection on, my institution there. But, hey, if somebody can learn from this and do that we have an obligation to say that too, warts and all on that. But maybe I can remain anonymous or finesse it that way. But that's a great point there. There's a lot of things. It's easy to come up with ideas to write articles. You had a question?
So feedback from readers, have you gotten a lot? And you mentioned that there were some that blew up, some articles. Was that in the feedback realm or?
Yeah, that was in the feedback realm, and I really don't want to get into that one. But it does happen. Actually,
the fears that keep people from writing, I think.
Let me talk about the good ones first. It's not like I get a lot of them, but I think through the years and what I've written, like 25 big and little things, I think I've gotten about 15 comments through the years, and I keep them, and I put them up on the board in my office, because when I'm having a bad day, it's like, well, at least somebody likes me, other than the dog, and it's gratifying to hear that. It makes it worth it. But, it's not like, it's not like, the Justin Bieber Twitter page where he's got 100,000 followers or anything like that. But you do get that. The negative things, I've had a few. There's a lot of attorneys who, I don't know if they're bored or what, but they'll look through a publication and they'll pick out every little substantive flaw in it, which is a good thing. It really is. But I had some guy send something to me about Nebraska legislative history that, I'm big enough to admit I should have worded it differently. I was a little too broad and general on some things there. And actually, he sent me a letter, and I think he did a letter to the editor, too. But I was okay with that. That's fine. I mean, you're putting ideas out there, and people are going after them. It's like, yeah, that made me a better writer the next time. But yeah, you get good and bad, but it's not like you're going to get an overwhelming amount of comments and that type of thing.
I ask a quick question or
Yes.
make a comment. So one thing I'd really like, two places that I think law librarians need to publish all the time. And one of them is your alumni publications.
Yes.
And I look at those, we get a lot of them in our library, and I look at them really regularly, and I'm just appalled at how rarely you see anything written by or about librarians. So that's one place. And then I just want to second your comment about bar journals, because if you stop to think about the number of lawyers that those suckers go to and the audience that you could reach, and not just think about it in the, what do I have to share that I can help a lawyer or a law firm or the practice of law move forward, but think about it also as promoting the profession.
Absolutely.
And promoting us, right? So I don't care what the subject matter is, I love to see articles that are written by librarians, and I just think more of us need to take that on as a professional responsibility, right? Because as you said, most of these publications are dying to get content, and there are county, we've got a county bar bulletin here in King County that's just a newspaper, but the Rita Dermody writes a piece, and Kim often has pieces in there all the time. And I just think that, those are people we need to connect with, and they need to know that we exist. And it's such an easy way to do that. I really want to encourage people to really think about that.
I agree with that, and I'll get to you in a second, Linda. The last thing in the Northwest Lawyer was they do a top 10, and it's like, man, that's an easy article. That takes a day to do those types of things. So if your state bar publication does one of those, well, do that for goodness sakes. And if they don't have a regular top 10 thing, say, I got an idea for a top 10, and you're David Letterman there. So it's pretty easy to do that type of thing. But that is where I got my start on these things. So Penny's right on. Linda.
This is something I just learned last week, so I wanted to share it. Better that you write the articles yourselves that you want to write instead of somebody else contacting you and wanting to interview you for, say, a blog posting, because that's what happened to me, and I didn't know what the blog posting, what the point was supposed to be, but she just asked me some what I thought were strange questions, so I answered them, and then she wrote the article and posted it, and one of the deans at my law school just went into this huge tirade about how awful the article was and take it down, it needs to be rewritten, and I completely agreed. It was horrible. It was a terrible article, from word choice, sentence structure, content, tone, organization. It was unbearable to look at. But I felt like, well, I guess, it's her writing, and her boss should be editing her work. I don't want to barge in. But it went on for a good 7 days of back and forth and rewriting every single paragraph. And then, well, why don't you ask Linda for a quote on this? And if I'd just written the damn thing myself, it would have been so much smoother. So that's a lesson, I think.
I've got 2 comments on that. Did I tell you she's a pretty good editor in regards to things there? And she's vicious, too, about it. So she'll clean up things very nicely on that. The other comment I want to make on that is I didn't talk about blogs or Twitter or any of that sort of stuff because I'm just not interested. I know I sound like an old man there. This internet thing is going to go away. That sort of thing. But that's something you can do. The problem with starting your own blog or any of that sort of stuff, man, that's an investment. That's like a mortgage. You got it for a long time. And there's a lot of things that are out there that, they don't last more than 6 months. Now, guest blogging is one thing, but, I'd rather do something a little more traditional this way. And, if it's part of, tenure or any of those types of things, those are really looked down upon, although I think things are changing significantly now in regards to it. And don't even get me started with Twitter. I don't understand it. 120, 40 characters. I don't like that. So, do you have a question?
No, I have a suggestion, and that is to consider non-law library publications. Recently, I wrote an article in a 50-state survey of laws that impacted public library policies about bringing guns into the library. And the law library journals and publications wouldn't take it because it wasn't law library enough. So I published in the Public Library Quarterly, which happens to be peer-reviewed, so it works for tenure. And I think it was more of a practical article that way. It certainly reached the audience I was trying to get, although there are public law libraries. And the ALA online magazine editor picked it up and interviewed me for an article she wrote. So another way to get your research out there.
That's a great point. And in fact, early in my career, I was asked to do a presentation at a state library association. And it was an easy subject of, I hated the name, Where the Secret Laws Are. But it was essentially geared toward, I wore a tinfoil hat or something like that. But it was about, it was aimed at public libraries and public reference librarians on, basic sort of civic stuff and finding work product from the three branches of government on a state level and a federal level. And I've actually turned that into two different programs, 14 years apart, and they just ate it up. That could easily be translated into an article there, and I think you're right about that. So non-law library and non-legal too, which was your point there. Historical sort of society publications too, those are pretty good, especially when you're getting into those areas. Another article that, or thing that's kind of the crown jewel, the ABA journal. It's like, man, I wouldn't mind doing that. That'd be a pretty good trophy. Another one is, it's the Student Lawyer, which I think is published by the ABA, and there's also this National Jurist, the magazine for law students. I'm not sure if they are together or something like that, but no.
Student lawyers from the section of legal education.
Okay.
ABA, or some division of it, or young lawyers.
They were going through. They had some general editor problems there. And
that's a Crittenden publication, and over the years, I don't know if it, their editorial quality has not been.
But look, it's a good starter house, 800 square feet, that type of thing. Exactly. So, and as Penny said there,
and it's their staff writing that I take issue with, not the contributions to it.
But it's a good way. I mean, it's like, hey, you're in law school. There are librarians there, and they're not just shushing and making sure everything's tidy there. But yeah, that's thanks for that input. Any others? Oh, yeah, no.
Where do you find the time?
I don't do other things. No, I procrastinate and I go in on the weekends. Yeah, that's hard. That goes back to my whole thing on the short and happy guide thing. I mean, I would love to do that. That's just such an investment of time. I also have another article that I'm working on. I think I'm in year 4 of it. So it's hard. That's why, these shorter ones are easier to do. And they're also my release from, I don't want to deal with that issue that's going to take me forever and probably won't come out as a good resolution. This is something that I can accomplish. But I'm sort of joking on that, but you're correct. When I was a reference librarian, I had the time to do that. Now, not so much, but I should delegate a little bit more. But as I was talking about, we just hired a new reference librarian, and I would like to co-author with her on some stuff because I want to help her in the profession too. And I want to get her experience and resume and all that sort of stuff up and kind of mentor her and introduce her to that sort of thing. So that's a way to find a little bit of time on it. But yeah, you're right. There's only 24 hours in a day, and I do like to go home sometimes. Yes.
You mentioned you should contact publishers, the editors, before you start an article. Mm-hmm. How receptive do you find them if you have a couple ideas for an article to bouncing ideas for an article off them?
They've been very receptive, from the bar publications to Spectrum to it's been a joy dealing with them. Is there a Lexus rep here? Years ago, it was a little bit harder dealing with Matthew Bender and Lexus when they were going through all that sort of get together there. I don't mean to. That was mean of me. I shouldn't have done that, but they were more on deadlines on things. So, and they're making money. They're in the business of doing that. So deadlines are a little bit harder there. Whereas the bar publications, they're more of a labor of love type thing. So, we're a little bit more, we're academic, we're a little more comfortable with that type of thing. Whereas these guys, they have to make the payroll and do all that sort of stuff. So it was a little bit harder with them. Yes.
Well,
I'm not a librarian, so I'm kind of curious to know, is the reward, is it
I'm just curious in all these articles.
Her question was, what's the reward here? Is it personal satisfaction? Is it money? It's a combination. There's some law schools, although it's a little bit harder these days. You can get a grant to write during the summertime. Now, I'm on a 12-month contract. I'm working in the summertime. I also love it when students are like, well, what are you going to do this summer? Work. Every day. So there's some money in regards to it. And some, depending on the school, some of the grants are quite generous. I was talking to some people in Texas, at some private schools in Dallas, and I'm like, oh my God, that's a lot of money there. But generally, it's personal satisfaction. We're librarians. It's kind of like, I'm not going to missions to Mars or anything like that. So it's not like I'm an adrenaline junkie or anything like that. But there's some satisfaction in just doing it. Yes.
Well, I simply have a comment piggybacking to the question we had, before this one, regarding on contacting editors. Mm-hmm. I just want to make a comment and share my personal experience. Recently had experience with Journal of Legal Education. I'm not quite sure whether you've
that's an AALS publication.
Yeah, it's a pretty prestigious publication, but I don't think it really works if you send in your proposal or your idea over to the editorial board. Sometimes you don't really get a very good feedback from them, or sometimes you rarely get a feedback from them. So just my thinking, toward that question is more like it depends. Sometimes with the law review article, it's sometimes the same. If you contact the editors ahead of time, you may not necessarily get a very good feedback, which sometimes could be frustrating.
That's a very good point, and that's the distinction between scholarly materials and sort of the, I don't mean to say fluffier, but non-scholarly stuff. Yeah, I think my suggestions on contacting the editors in regards to the scholarly things is good luck with that, because not much is going to happen in regards to that. And you might be violating some unwritten rules and that sort of thing, and then they hate you and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's an extremely good point, and thank you for pointing that out. Sort of middle ground. Ooh, I'm really going over on this.
Yeah, Lana has a message to make, and then we have to move on.
Okay.
Were there any other questions? Any last minute questions before we move out to break?
Thank you. You were a wonderful group.
Thank you, Patrick. Stop by and see Vanessa at the AALL table. She's got a couple of things to raffle. We've got the free registration for next year's conference and also a free membership. So please stop by and see her. We'll be doing the raffle at the end of today's session. Also, I've got evaluation sheets on the table, so please take some time and fill those out before you leave today. For anybody who's doing the tour, anybody who hasn't signed up for the tour to the Glass Museum and would like to go, please see me during the break or after we meet. The shuttle leaves at the hotel promptly at 1:30, and we do have room on the shuttle. And finally, for anybody doing the do-it-yourself tour tomorrow, Harriet Zook is going, and she would like some people to hang out with. It's going to be a fun tour. There's a lot of really cool things to see in Ballard if you haven't been over there. And then last, we've got half an hour. Please stop by if you haven't already done so. Talk to our vendors, and thank you very much.
Deprecate yourself too much. Great for me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm the one who's doing it. So I just put fiber on.
Sitting down?
Yeah, we're all good. And here's
Even if you use one of these, which would be
It's all there.
It's all there. Okay, and then to advance, you just click over.
Yeah, you can just click over, or you can use the arrow keys, the enter key, backspace, just back one,
You do all
left arrow.
Okay.
Yeah, you have here.
Okay.
That. You want to decide to use laser, decide to use the remote. Yes, these are 3 buttons we're going to use at all. Laser pointer. These 2 buttons, generally avoid those. If they do, though, just in case. This button works as you escape and enter back into PowerPoint. So if you accidentally hit this, watch this, it's going to escape out of it.
Yeah.
So if you're somewhere down on slide 10, 20, and this gets hit this again, it goes back to slide 1.
Okay.
This?
The other one, it'll take any slide. No. Okay.
So
don't hit it.
Don't hit that.
Yeah, okay.
Just do not hit that. This one's another button, unless you really have an intention to hit it. But what it does, it goes into a black screen mode. And while you're in slideshow mode, watch this. And here, it goes beep. It goes black. Oh, what happened? Press it again.
Okay.
It's back.
All right.
So, Kayla, avoid those two.
Okay.
Those kind of, these two buttons, if they get accidentally get in, they're kind of like, just take you out of your flow.
Right.
Whoa, okay.
Okay.
So, you can use just these.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you. Great.
There was no audio, is that correct?
No.
didn't write it down.
Blood sugar going. Hang on. Have my cough drops ready. Lined up.
He's the one person in the world I've never complained to about traffic.
No.
Yeah, maybe I'll just use the. And I was gonna time. Oh god, my mail's fine. Time. Fortunately, I can get my Kindle. I can't see it. So it's just to keep an eye on it. Is there a clock? Oh, there's a clock.
Yeah, there's a clock. I think we can all kind of.
Okay.
I can see what you're there. Well, I'm gumming this up, so let me. I wonder if anyone had a highlighter.
Somebody yours doesn't have one.
Because I was like, oh, this is so scribbly. Yeah. Right. 15 minutes. Well, yeah. So I don't think I have. Yeah. Okay. So let's take it. Yeah. Session yesterday. I'm fine either way. But if we really are trying to get through both questions,
we're very sound. We're great. Someone died this morning.
I know that's what I was thinking, my teeth. But I have the same thing. I have that like chest cold cough. Some for I'm gonna just start
cracking.
Yeah.
I have my cough drops lined up. That's the way I do it.
You know, like this.
Yeah, because it would be better for us to just say, yeah, tell us how.
Yeah.
Can this change to me?
Yeah. Okay. I think I'd be really good. And the other thing too is like it would be better for us to say, you know, our introductions were I've been teaching, I've taught, you know, whatever. Yeah, I'm not doing research. Like that background of the online legal research rather than like the other stuff.
Right. Just in the program.
Oh wait, so I haven't updated my they took it from the website. I haven't updated it. No.
Yeah, I would never have known what to do. We spent the whole first today trying to figure out who you were. I'm like, do you think that's her? Do you think that's her?
Kids, I was like, I'm not calling my hair. And so I was just like, okay, that. So I was like, oh, yeah, blonde hair. I was like, no, I had blonde hair.
You know who I thought was good? The woman who did the research program that sort of sat in the middle, black jacket. The one who talked about her age. Oh yeah. She was sitting kind of down the road from me the other day. I nobody else here looks like you. I was trying to find you. Like this blonde, you know, kind of young, not, you know, I mean, look at all these people here that are. Is there an order we're supposed to do for introducing you? Or we can just do it that way. I thought you had written it down. I'm like, oh,
I had, but I think this was the order.
what?
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. I think it's really strange that they have all these. Hello?
Taking their stuff and going.
Yeah. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I was and this is getting much more conversational.
Yeah. Would not be interested.
Creating in-house teaching material. They needed the flexibility to do something that kind of pretty much just said.
Oh, no.
Well, I guess my question is that you have a group that's primarily from librarians from San Francisco.
Oh.
For us, we have a law libraries in Puget Sound, which is primarily just like from librarians in Seattle and through the academic librarians. But it's really helpful for me.
Your students?
Yeah.
Yeah. So are you saying one? Yeah, you choose. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Thank you so much. I'll do it. Yeah, thanks.
Get started.
Okay.
These people have connecting flights and so forth.
Okay, no worries.
We're going to get started momentarily. We want to be conscious of time this morning just for those who have flights coming right up. For our next program, we've got a trio of speakers who are going to talk to us about planning for and launching an online ALR course. We've got with us this morning Hillary Hardcastle from Hastings and Barbara Swat Angstrom from Seattle University and Suzanne Mawhinney from USF's Law Library. Please welcome Suzanne, Hillary, and Barbara.
Thanks. Sorry, I sound terrible, but thank you all for sticking around for this final presentation. Before we get started, I just wanted to get a show of hands of how many of you teach advanced legal research, some sort of advanced legal research. course? And how many of you have taught or teach an online advanced legal research course? So we have one person out there. All right, well, feel free to pitch in anytime during this presentation. And for the rest of you, we're just hoping to get you at least to consider transforming your traditional ALR course into an online course, or offering it as an alternative to your students. So first off, in terms of our own experience teaching online courses, I'm the head of reference services at UC Hastings, and this past spring I converted my California legal research course into an online course, which I taught this past summer in our Summer Legal Institute. And then I am teaching it again this fall. And then I'm also preparing a more, I guess, a 3-unit advanced legal research course that will also be offered online for the spring.
And I'm Barbara Swaddingstrom from Seattle University, and I was just looking through some of my notes of when I first proposed an advanced legal research class with my co-instructor, Carrie Fitzgerald, who's standing up there in the green. And throughout this presentation, I will say we a lot, and whenever I say we, I'm referring to myself and Carrie. But when I look back at the date, we first did a proposal in 2005. We got a summer research grant to create a class, and then I believe the first time we taught it was either in the summer of 2006 or 2007. So we've been doing this for quite a while. And currently we're teaching 2 sections of a summer advanced online legal research class. And I'm trying to develop an advanced foreign and international legal research class, but I'm finding it's very difficult to find time to do that. So I'm hoping to get that done soon.
And I'm Suzanne Mulwinning. I teach at University of San Francisco School of Law, and I just developed and co-taught with 2 other librarians an advanced legal research course for this last summer. It was a 3-credit course that we taught over 7 weeks, and it was mostly a success, and we'll be repeating it next summer. I'm also developing a 1-credit tax research course for our brand new tax LLM program, which I'm going to be teaching starting in about 3 weeks. It's a 1-credit course that's going to be taught over 5 weeks, which is why it's sort of starting at a strange time. And that's going to be in a hybrid course, meaning that 2 of those weeks will be taught in person in sort of a flipped classroom style, and 3 weeks of that course will be taught as an online course, so the students will not meet in class, and it'll be taught virtually as an online course.
Okay, so in this program we're going to talk about, essentially there are 3 parts. We're going to talk about the preliminary considerations, the things you should think about as you're planning your online ALR course. Then the do's and don'ts based on our experience teaching online courses. And then the pros and cons of an online ALR course versus the traditional in-person course. Okay, so in terms of the preliminary considerations, so the course basics, one issue is whether you want to offer it as a hybrid course, which Suzanne just mentioned, that her tax course will be a hybrid, meaning that some of the class time is spent in the traditional classroom, and then some of the time is spent online. So if it's a 3-unit class, you maybe meet 1 hour a week, and then the other 2 hours are spent online, watching videos, that sort of thing. So that's one consideration. The advantage of the hybrid is that you do have that face-to-face interaction, but it does require then that the students be on campus. So students who are off interning somewhere else wouldn't be able to participate in that course. Then there's the synchronous versus asynchronous consideration. I have heard of online ALR instructors who do their lectures basically as live feeds. So they stand at a podium and they're videotaped, and the students are watching it in real time, which seems daunting to me technologically, but and I guess that's probably does foster more of a sort of traditional classroom experience, because the students can ask questions, as the instructor is lecturing. But again, it sort of reduces that flexibility because the students have to be committed to watching the class at that particular time it's offered. All three of us offer our courses asynchronously, meaning students can watch the videos or do the readings anytime. The next thing is the timing, and by that I just meant how the course unfolds. Since you're offering it online, you have a lot of flexibility in terms of when you make the materials available. So when I taught my course this summer, I allowed students to complete it at an accelerated pace. So it was 13 modules divided into 6 weeks, but I let them complete it. They could complete it as quickly as they wanted to. I set deadlines, but if they wanted to complete it all in the first 3 days, they could. But I set it up so that they had to complete it in order, so they couldn't complete Module 2 until they had completed Module 1 and so on. And this fall, I'm teaching, over the regular 13-week semester. And with this, again, I'm letting them complete it at an accelerated pace, but every 4 weeks they sort of have to stop and wait for the next. So basically every 4 weeks they kind of catch up to each other. And that's just I feel like that keeps the students in sync with each other more than if I let them, some of them complete it in the first week of the semester.
We had a more strict and traditional timing schedule. We had our 7 weeks divided up into topics. So week 1 was research strategies. The next week was maybe statutes. The next week's cases, case searching, and so on. And we divided our weeks so Monday through Sunday. Monday they would get their new materials, readings, videos, things like that, and their assignments for the week. And their major assignment, which we refer to as a solo assignment because it was the one big assignment they had to do for the week, and they had to do it alone. They couldn't work together, was due on Sunday. So they would do all that week's work, and then on Monday they would start their new week. So if they did, week 2 was statutes, then Monday morning of week 3 they would get their new materials for case law or whatever it was. And they could not work ahead. So everybody was always working on the same thing at the same time. And we had strict deadlines, and so it was a much more traditional schedule for our class.
In our class, we did that same setup. We had every week had a different subject matter, but we also put up all the materials that we would cover until the midterm. You could work ahead at your own pace, but there were strict deadlines at the end of each week for what had to be turned in. And then once the midterm was turned in, then we opened up the second half of the class up until the final exam so they could work ahead. And I think as everybody's found, if you give them the time to work in that ahead, they still turn it in right at the deadline. So, it's good to offer them that, but no, you're not going to have to pay for it later because they'll still just turn it in at the deadline.
Okay, and then the next question was class size. And here we just wanted to emphasize, don't turn your course into a MOOC. You really, even though it's an online course and you're not limited to a physical space, it is a lot of work. The grading is a lot of work. So I taught my class as a solo instructor, and I capped it at 20 students, and even that feels like a lot of work.
Yeah, we're capped at, we have 2 sections of 15 each, and the only reason we did that is we were asked to, our course has such huge demand and we have huge waiting lists that we were asked to add another section, and we said we will add another section, but we're only doing 2 sections of 15 because that's the amount of work we can do. And Carrie will get a chuckle out of this because as I was rereading through our course proposal back when we knew nothing about teaching online legal research classes, there was something in there that said, and we feel that in the future we can offer it up to 90 students at a time. And I was just like, what were we thinking?
We capped ours at 30. Even though I had co-teachers, we divided our weeks up, so there was only one teacher teaching any one week. So each week that you were teaching, you had those full 30 students or however many you had. So you were grading everything for the week. So 30 would have been plenty. We ended up with initially 24, and they sort of dwindled down to, I think, 18 at the end. We lost a few for various reasons. I think 30 would have been plenty.
The next consideration then is just the number of credits. And if you're converting a traditional ALR course that you've taught in the past into an online course, this can be easier because you can just sort of cover the same material. If you're starting fresh, it can be a little tricky figuring out the number of credits because even if you're making video lectures with editing and that, your lectures will probably not, you hope your lectures don't span the amount of time that you would have spent, in the classroom lecturing. So that can be a little difficult. And then the last consideration is access to the library and library resources. And that's where, and this is something I thought about as I was planning my course, was whether I wanted to require them to use print materials in the library. And ultimately I decided not to, because I didn't want to force students to be, to be able to access the library. I had a lot of students who were interested in taking the course who were interning elsewhere. So, but that's something to think about. If you think that teaching the print materials is essential, then you can require that. There's just that limitation in terms of geographical.
I did want to make one other point about the number of credits. We had initially decided to offer our course for 2 credits, and we ended up increasing it to 3 credits, even though it was a summer course, and it's a lot, because we realized that students needed to have at least 3 credits to qualify for financial aid, for federal financial aid. And we were concerned that students wouldn't take our course, or wouldn't be able to take our course if they couldn't get financial aid, unless they found another credit somewhere. So we increased it to 3 credits in order for students to be able to get the aid they needed to take our course. And we think that that was a good decision. And one other thing on the access to library resources, we opened our course to non-USF students. And we had to really think about the assignments we gave and the resources that we were requiring our students to use, and whether we were requiring use of any databases that might not be available to non-USF students. So if, for example, we gave an assignment that required them to use IntelliConnect, which we have, but maybe other students from other law schools didn't have a subscription to, we needed to be careful we weren't assigning things that someone else may not have access to through their library, or make sure we could get them access for the summer term. So things to think about when you're designing your course if you have students from elsewhere, in addition to whether you're using print versus digital materials.
Okay, then the next consideration is technology, and online courses inevitably involve technology, and you will probably need some sort of learning management system to serve as a platform for your course, which will host videos. If you make videos, it'll host readings. It's where assignments will be posted. And this is a list of some of the sort of more popular learning management systems out there. Blackboard for Lexis, Twen, Moodle, which is an open source platform, and Canvas. And here you might not have a choice. It may just be whatever your university or your law school has purchased. This is a shot of my course at Hastings. Hastings had purchased Blackboard, which is a very nice platform. It has a lot of bells and whistles. I mean, there are all these options for things you can do, which can actually be can be time consuming to learn all of them, but it does give you a lot of flexibility. So here you see, I divided my course into these course modules. So these were just folders in which I kept, each week's worth of content. And then within those modules, there were links to the videos, the quiz, instructions for the weekly research exercise, and then I had them post their responses on a discussion forum. And then they were, to earn top points, they were supposed to comment on each other's posts, which we'll talk about is not all that effective, really. And this is just an example of one of the quizzes. So Blackboard gives you probably 20 options for question types. So fill in the blank, short answer, true, false. And the nice thing is if you set, true, false, it will grade those for you. So you don't have to go through and grade those. And then this is just an example of the discussion forum with a student posting a response to one of the weekly research assignments. And then again, other students can then comment on this.
So this is our Lexis Blackboard version of the class. So everybody that has an academic Lexis account, you have access to Blackboard, which, as Hillary said, is a really fantastic course management tool. It has a lot of flexibility. There are some issues with it that you would want to know about before you get started, but overall it's really, so far that's the system that we're liking the best. But one of the things that, and I hadn't really thought about it before this year, but it has a lot of flexibility, but it tends to, you use that flexibility. So, if you take a look at this, it's a little bit busy, when you're looking at that. We divide things by week and we try and keep it very clear. But just the nature of an online class, there are a lot of moving parts to the class. So, you have to really pay attention to how it looks to the students. This past summer, our university switched to, I'll just do the Canvas now just to.
Want me to advance?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yours doesn't work.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm used to teaching, online. Sorry, we showing Canvas. So this is our Canvas website. So our university bought Canvas, which is a course management system, and the university's kind of bought into it. And this system has a lot less flexibility. So with Canvas, you kind of have to put things in the boxes you're told to. The advantage of this is that it's very easy to figure out. Like, you could set up a Canvas course really quickly. The disadvantage is you don't have that flexibility, but what we found was, from our perception, Canvas didn't work as well because we didn't have the flexibility to name the modules the way we wanted to. But from the student perspective, they love that simplicity. So that's one of the main things that I would say when you're thinking about what platform you're going to use. Think about it. It's hard, but think about it from the student perspective. What's going to work best for the student? And then one last thing, and this has sort of been our deal breaker for any system that we've used. We've used probably 4 by at this point in our advanced legal research class history. The grade by question feature. And we did end up this fall going back to Lexis's version of Blackboard just because they have a really good grade by question feature that saves you so much time with grading. And that ended up being kind of, the one thing that we found was really more important than anything else for us in the class. Sorry, I screwed up the button.
Go back to.
Okay, so that's me. So we used Twen, which are your students all using Twen? Any of you? Yeah. Okay. So this should look familiar. And one of the reason we decided to go with Twen, our campus actually has Canvas. Our main campus does. We're not really using it yet. When we toyed with the idea of using Canvas, but we thought, here we are using a whole new way of teaching a class, which is to go online, and we thought we could challenge ourselves and learn this new platform, but we're already sort of taking on this new challenge, and the students are going to be taking on this new challenge of going online, and maybe they're going to be overwhelmed already, so maybe we should go with something we already know. So we decided to go with Twen for this first go-round, and it turned out pretty well. And we think the students liked it because they use Twen from day one of law school. They get on the Westlaw and they're on Twen, and they use Twen for most of their classes. So for the most part, it was a success. So this is just the first landing page of our class, and you can see everything on the left there. We just kept it very simple. A folder for everything, the syllabus. We made little introductory videos so they could see what we look like. We hated that because no one wants to record themselves. And we used a teleprompter. It was awful. But then you can see we had the discussion forums, and then we just had a folder for each week of class where they could get all their reading materials very clearly laid out, and a separate folder for the assignment Dropbox. And I think that's it. I can't really see. And then the next slide is just a sample of 1 week's, of the discussion forums. Is that the next one?
Reading assignment.
No, that's one reading assignment. I'm sorry. So that's just one example of 1 week's class work, basically the reading assignments that happens to be for case law searching, so you can just see the reading materials. I think these are out of order. Some articles, some instructional videos, some screenshots that I made for how to find, databases and sources and things like that. And then the third one should be.
That was the last one.
Okay. This is just our discussion forum page. So we just had a discussion forum. We assigned discussion forum assignments, as Hillary mentioned she did as well. For each week, we gave them either a question to sort of think about and discuss, or we gave them, in some weeks, an actual research activity or assignment where they had to go out and do the research and then come back and kind of share their experience and talk to each other about it. Marginally successful. The students really hate being told to do things and discuss them. I guess similar to the way they do that in class. They just don't like to share. But we made them do it and we gave them points for it, and so they did. So this is just what our discussion page, forum page looked like. We also set up a separate discussion forum for sort of general chatter, which we called the water cooler. And they would just occasionally show up and ask kind of a general question if it didn't go anywhere else. A word about discussion forums for TWEN, if any of you are thinking about using TWEN. It worked okay. TWEN was not really set up, I think, for heavy discussion forum use. There's really only 2 ways to display the discussion forum. Neither of them are really great. We have discussed that with the folks at TWEN. We hope that there are some improvements coming down the road. We talked to them about it at WALL this summer. So we do plan on using TWEN again next summer. So it wasn't anything that was so horrible that we wouldn't use them again. If anyone is thinking about doing an online course and is feeling stressed about learning a new platform, you can use TWEN successfully. So if that's something that's a barrier for you, TWEN is a viable option.
And then the last one is Moodle, which we don't use, so we just took this.
Well, I've actually used Moodle.
It in the past, but we didn't have an example of it from a legal research course, so this is just taken off the web. And this, as I mentioned, is open source, it seems to be a little simpler than
Moodle's very easy to use. The one caution I would say is, you're not going to have the tech support, right? If you use an open source thing on the web, you're going to have to do more of the work yourself. So Moodle's very clean, it's very user friendly, but I would say stick with Blackboard on Lexis or TWEN if you want to do it, because you need that tech support, and we'll talk about that in a second.
Okay, and then the last technology consideration, or one other technology consideration, is if you're planning to make your own video lectures, then you'll need some sort of screencasting software that will capture your computer screen. And these seem to be the 2 most popular choices. Adobe Captivate, which is, I think, about $300 for an education license. So it's more expensive than the other option, Camtasia. But it has more bells and whistles. It lets the students interact with the videos, so they can click on parts of the screen in order. So, which, as far as I know, Camtasia doesn't allow you to do, although it's less expensive. It's about $180 for an education license. And it lets you do plenty of things. You can, zoom in, zoom out, add call-outs, and then do very precise editing. So you can edit out every pause. All those times when you're waiting for Lexis Advanced to load, you can edit all of that out, and it all seems seamless. All right. So, and then the last consideration then is pedagogy.
So in terms of instruction method, there are different ways you can sort of instruct your students. Obviously, you're not standing in front of a classroom. The most common ways, of course, are video lectures. We've all created some videos. You can also use commercial videos. For example, Lexis and Westlaw create their own videos. I also borrowed videos that other librarians or instructors have made. We borrowed one of yours, Hillary, that was out there on YouTube. Amy borrowed one of yours on Keysight and Shepard's. So if you have them out on YouTube, people might be stealing them. Folks might use written lectures for their class or other written materials, legal textbooks. We use those very sparingly. I don't like to just ply our students with lots of heavy reading materials. There aren't that many great ones out there, in my opinion. I do offer some readings, but it's usually journal articles. We also use some Cali lessons, partly for instruction, partly for also assessment. We actually require them to get a certain score in order to get full credit. We also use some quizzing to make sure they're doing the readings or watching the videos. So that's most of the instructional materials that we use. Did you want to add anything right now? Or? Okay. In terms of content, we basically began with our regular ALR courses and sort of modified that material. We were already flipping our classrooms anyway, so we had some videos already made. We'd already taken our long lectures and shrunk them considerably, so we had a good start. We had already created a lot of videos anyway. So we didn't have to take 45-minute lectures and make them smaller. We already had pretty small lectures anyway. But we had basically the content already worked out, the research strategies, case law searching, statutes, and the like, and we just sort of tweaked the delivery a little bit. In terms of assessment, we used mainly...
Sorry, just about content. As I had mentioned before, one consideration is whether you want to cover print material. And as I said, I decided not to require the students to use it, but in my videos I did provide screenshots of the codes and Witkin and all that in print, so they would see what it looks like. But because I didn't want to require students to come to the library, I didn't require them to use the print material themselves. Go ahead.
Absolutely, and we did the same thing. We didn't require any print materials either. In terms of assessment, we used a couple of different things. Our main mode of assessment was what I mentioned earlier, which we called the solo assignment. Each week they had one major research assignment covering that week's materials, so statutes or legislative history or whatever it might be. We also graded them on their forum, discussion forum participation. Some weeks we had short quizzes. Some weeks, again, they had Cali assignments. And that was basically it for us. Each week, the way we had it, I mentioned we had 7 weeks, and each week was its sort of own unit. We divided it up so each week was worth 100 points, but those 100 points were divided up slightly differently each week depending on that week's material. And since I was co-teaching, each one of us sort of decided how those 100 points could be allocated for the week. We had our syllabus, we had a very detailed syllabus, and so the students could see exactly how the 100 points were allocated from beginning of the term. So they knew from day one what everything was worth, and everything had a points value. In terms of office hours, we used the live discussion feature on Twin and set up 3 hours during the week at different times so that we could have a synchronous, not asynchronous, but a synchronous live office hour session, so students could come and talk to us live if they wanted to. And then we also, and some students used that, but very few did. Most students just contacted us by email, and a few students actually came and saw us in the library. The one thing I would say about the live office hours is, the one thing we learned from the experience is most of our students didn't use us at all or didn't come to us at all in the beginning of the week, which we didn't really think about. But because that's the part of the week that they were sort of reading and studying and didn't really need us, we really should have made more of our office hours toward the end of the week. So for anyone who might consider doing a sort of a more traditional schedule the way we did, I would say don't have too many office hours in the beginning of the week, because you're probably going to be sitting there in front of your computer not doing anything. But you have to stay there because you've scheduled it. So maybe make more office hours toward the end. Also consider making some office hours in the evening, because an online course is likely to attract students who are working or doing externships and might need you to be around in the evening because they can't get to your office hours during the day.
I just want to add one thing about office hours. So Carrie and I have like basically open door policies for office hours. You can contact us at any time. And I think the thing that was really surprising to us, because we were teaching this online class, was the number of people that called us. So they'd want to call and talk to you, which I thought everyone would just want to contact you online. So think about that if you're doing office hours. they want the flexibility of how they contact you. We have a lot of people that just show up at our office, and we'll meet with them. They'll block out an hour from their schedule, because we give priority to part-time and evening students that don't have the option of taking the class during the school day. So these guys are on really tight schedules, and so we see a lot of them. We speak to them via phone. We see them in the office, and then we do get a lot of emails. And the other thing is that we try really hard to be available on weekends. Evenings we used to, but not so much anymore. So, because our deadlines are all at the end of the week, so we try and be available on weekends when our deadlines are, but evenings not so much.
I'll just say, actually, in terms of offering, virtual office hours. So I offered during the summer. I offered my students virtual office hours via Adobe Connect, which we had at UC Hastings, and I offered them in the evenings, thinking that my students were all working during the day. And I never had a single person sign up, and I don't know if they were intimidated by Adobe Connect or just I had people email me questions basically, but I think. Yeah, virtual office hours just never worked for them. So, so this semester, I'm just telling them I'm basically doing in-person office hours. I'm telling them when I'm at the reference desk, and they can come by if they have any questions. Okay.
So I talked a little bit in the beginning about our initial crafting our course proposal. So basically, most of you, if you're thinking about doing an online advanced legal research class, presumably you've already either taught a standard semester-long advanced legal research class, or it's been offered at your law school. So that's great. You have the content covered. You don't need to worry about that. That's probably already gone through your curriculum review process, so don't worry about that. The two main things that I think are important to cover are your intended audience. So who are you trying to reach with this online class that is not being served by the traditional classes that are offered, or who are being underserved by those classes? So yeah, maybe they could take the class, but they would have to rearrange their schedule 3 years in advance to get in there. So your intended audience is going to be a really important part of your proposal. And then the other thing that the faculty, the curriculum committee want to know, and aside from are you going to do it synchronous or asynchronous? Are you going to do a hybrid? Or are you going to do fully online? That stuff that we covered at the beginning is all going to be important. But the thing that we get asked about when our Dean of Academic Affairs is reviewing our class for reporting purposes is, one, what are you doing for faculty to student interaction? How are you doing that? And the reason they're asking these questions, these 3 questions, are because of ABA Standard 306. These are the requirements for distance learning that the ABA has. So it's the student-to-faculty interaction that has to be substantive. Student-to-student interaction. Now, we're going to talk about this later on in the presentation, but that's one of the trickier things. So you want to think carefully how you're going to implement substantive student-to-student interaction. And then the third question that he often presents to us is, now how are you ensuring that the person who says they're taking the class is actually the person who's taking the class? And basically, we're doing that. Our registration process is run through the registrar's office when we do Canvas, and then when we do the class on Lexis Advance, then they have to go through their Lexis password. So that seems to be satisfying them for identity verification for now.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about some do's and don'ts based on our experience teaching online.
Okay, so establishing expectations is extremely important. I think students have the misconception about an online course, especially an online summer course. They think summer school equals, I think they think online summer credit, no credit means I don't have to show up and I don't have to do anything, and I still get credit. And that is really the opposite of what it is. Some of the questions we got around the time of our course and before the course, we had advertised our course, and students were coming in to their credit and asking questions, what's this going to be like? And one student asked, said, I'm going on a cruise for 3 weeks. Do you think I can take it on the cruise? Even though the internet's kind of sketchy and it's an online course. We had a guy wanting to know if he could take the whole course on his smartphone. We had another guy who was canyoneering all summer and didn't know if he was going to, when he would get to a computer, could he take the course? And then other people just, wanting to turn everything in late and all those sorts of things. And then just in general, the time commitment involved in this course. And so, and one of the biggest complaints we got at the end was just, that it was so much work and they didn't expect that and that sort of thing. And we have probably the most detailed syllabus you could ever have. We put everything in there and they have it available before they sign up, and long before the drop deadline and all of that, and they still complain, I didn't expect it to be what it was. So so the cruise ship person didn't take the course. The phone guy didn't take the course. We had another guy wanting to take the whole thing on his iPad, and he couldn't get into the videos and, all these kind of things. The canyoneering guy did take our course and he barely passed. So it's just, we've actually considered for next summer having the students sign some sort of contract with us that says, yes, I read your syllabus or I read your course requirements, I understand, something along those lines, because you just need to make it very clear what your top requirements are for the course, because students just don't quite get it. And I don't know if it's because they've just never taken an online course, and they don't quite understand that it really is real. So whatever your top requirements are for the class, or your I won't budge on these, you need to find a way, whatever that way is for you, to make those expectations clear from the beginning, and to reinforce them so students understand that you're serious about them, because they're still going to complain at the end, but sort of that message needs to be clear.
I just want to put out 2 things you can do to help this. So we've been doing this for a long time, and we had the same issue. Like, we had this great syllabus. Why didn't you do the post? I didn't know it was due. Well, it was in the syllabus. I couldn't find the syllabus. Okay, fine. So now what we do is every year, well before the class starts, while they still have a chance to drop the class, we send out an email that says, is this course right for you? And we list everything they have to do in the class. We list things in terms of billable hours. So when we say it will take this amount of time, we say think billable hours. So it's not like, I'm checking Facebook, I'm tweeting, I'm doing all this stuff, within the hour. No, those are billable hours. That's serious time you're spending on the class. So we send that out, and at the end of that email we have student testimonials, and a lot of the testimonials from when we first started the class were always the same. It was like, this class was way more work than I expected. I did more work in this 2-credit class than I did in my 4-credit evidence class, but it's hard to complain because I learned so much. So, stuff like that where they know from other students that it was a ton of work. And we get a lot of movement on the waiting list, as I said, after we send that letter out. And then Carrie had the brilliant idea this year of, okay, how do we solve the syllabus question? So she said, on Canvas you can make a prerequisite to opening the class. So we have a little quiz that they have to take, and the quiz is basically, the syllabus says this, do you understand, yes or no? And so they have to click yes on everything, and if they don't click yes, they have to retake the quiz. And then once they have said that they understand every important point of the syllabus, then the course opens up. And man, that was just like this year, we got a lot fewer complaints about, I didn't know that was an expectation of the class. So that was the simplest solution. Carrie's a genius, and it solved that problem so well.
Okay, next one, do keep your videos short. So if you decide to do video lectures, as I did a lot of video lectures, keep them short. And that's for 2 reasons. One is students have very short attention spans, and I think the general rule is not to make your videos longer than 5 or 6 minutes. And you...
we just found a recent empirical study that was published. They studied 6.9 million video watching experiences, an empirical study, and found that 6 minutes or less is the time when students will stay engaged in watching a video. Anything over that, they lose you. So if you really need to convey information that goes beyond 6 minutes, you should make more than one video and just chunk it up.
Yeah, so I would, like, some of my classes had 10 videos, 10 5-minute videos, just each one covering a slightly different topic. And then I put on this slide the screenshot of Lexis, the new Lexis Advanced platform, because another reason for keeping your videos short is if the online resources that you're using change, then your video becomes obsolete. And so if you keep it short, it's easier to, redo a 3-minute video than a 15-minute video. And I had this experience with Lexis Advanced this semester because they switched to this new platform in early September, and I was 2 weeks into my online course. So I've been trying to catch up now each week with updating, the videos to reflect the new platform. So, which can be more work if your videos are longer.
I just have a quick question. We have an LMS in our firm. One of the things we're doing is
we pretty much gave up on making our own videos after like 2 or 3 years, because of the amount of time it takes, and because of the fact that the students, they have to be so short for the student to engage with it, and we just felt like there were better ways to do it. But for the students that are visual learners, a video that is provided by a vendor that is up to date is a great substitute. So yeah, we totally integrate that into our class.
We do as well, but not all of my videos are videos instructing on how to use a vendor tool. Some are, explaining a statute or how, the difference between a statute and a code or something like that. So it has nothing to do with that. So I have to make my own. So it might be a PowerPoint instruction, or PowerPoint presentation that I'm talking over, kind of thing.
Okay, next one is, do keep your class size small.
And just really quickly, I think this is very obvious, right? You want to keep your class size small. But the thing to think about it, the way that I think about it is, when you're teaching a traditional class in a classroom, there's a lot of passive learning going on. Not every one of you is asking me a question right now, or not every one of you is doing something. You're listening, and you're getting the information that way. When you're teaching an online class, when we're providing information to you, we have to test whether you're listening. We don't do that when we're talking like this. So basically there has to be some sort of either grade or review or something. You have to put hands on almost everything you put out there. That creates an enormous amount of work. So that's the main impetus for keeping the class size small, is to make sure that your workload is manageable. And so you've really got to divorce yourself from how you think about teaching a traditional class and how you think about teaching an online class.
Do you assign a point value to everything?
This is me too. So in our class, we had a lot, as I said, we had a lot of moving parts, and we were saying, this is a requirement of the class. You have to do a discussion, 4 discussion posts, 2 original posts, 2 responses. You have to do A, B, C, D. And students would blow things off if it's a requirement of the class. Once we assigned a point value, and they're tiny, they're like 2 points. Your discussion post is worth 2 points. I forgot to turn my discussion post in. Can I still turn it in? Do I have time? It's just like, it was amazing how much more seriously they took it for just a very small point value. And the other thing that I would suggest for assigning a point value to things is you're not backing yourself into a corner. So we had a couple instances where we started out not assigning point values to things like the discussion forums, and then students would blow them off. Well, in our syllabus, we said it was a required part of the class. To pass this class, you have to do A, B, C. If someone doesn't do it, okay, they theoretically should fail the class. All right, so you go and talk to your Dean of Student Affairs, and you say, well, they didn't do this discussion post, I'm going to fail them. That doesn't go over too well, because it's basically a very draconian measure for, was pretty much class participation. So that was one thing that we learned was you gave yourself an out. When you did the point values, you assigned point values. If they didn't do it, they lost the point value. But that helped to get them thinking about, okay, I need to do all of these things. So it does work on 2 levels.
Do you know your tech support?
So, this seems obvious, but last year I mentioned that we use Cali assignments. So last summer we were teaching, and one of my colleagues assigned a Cali assignment, and it was required, and he had a specific due date for it. And wouldn't you know, you may all recall that Cali totally redesigned its website in June while we were teaching. So it was down for about a week and a half, and we couldn't get to it. So that created a bit of a problem. And just the fact that we had someone there, a specific person that we could contact that was A, sympathetic to us, and B, could give us very clear information about when it was going to be back up, was really helpful and comforting, because we did have to tweak our schedule a little bit, but it was better than sort of calling a general helpline and just sort of having someone say, yeah, we think it's going to be back up on this date or whatever. So that was really helpful. And one other little story, we were doing a training. This was not for our online course, but the principle applies. We were doing a training. We do a January training every year for all of our 1Ls for Lexis and Westlaw training and terms and connectors. And we had set up this search problem and made up 200 handouts and all of this to do a search problem. And 2 days before Westlaw stopped working, and for exactly our search problem. And so we called and said, this isn't working. And they said, well, just change your problem. And we said, we have 200 handouts and slides, and all of these 1Ls are coming, and we can't change our problem. And so we were able to get someone on the phone, and it wasn't just the general helpline. We had a very specific person who, again, was sympathetic and really, really went to work to help us fix the one problem we needed, and they got it working, and we were able to use our sample. So having a specific tech person who will work with you as opposed to just calling the general number can really be helpful. So if you're working with a particular technology, it's good to have that person, a tech person that you can rely on in case things go south.
So now the dope.
Sorry, can I just say one more thing about the tech sports very quickly? So with tech, there's a bunch of known issues, like with Lexis Advanced Blackboard or Lexis Advanced version of Blackboard. It's set to East Coast time. So if you make an assignment due on your time period and it's set to East Coast time, and you have the Dropbox closing, it's going to shut down. So the more you can do at the beginning of getting to know what the known issues are, knowing your tech support, the better off you're going to be. You're not going to end up with those surprises. The other thing is, as part of your course proposal, the ABA Standard 306 requires you to have adequate tech support. So just when you're making that proposal, this is part of what you need to do to just create the course to start with and get it through the curriculum process.
All right. Again, don't make assignments due Sunday night.
So as I mentioned, all of our weeks went from Monday to Sunday, and all of our major solo assignments were due Sunday night. Seemed like a good idea at the time, but as students will do, they all waited until the last minute to do the assignments, which means all of their last minute questions were bubbling up on Sunday. And who do they need to ask those questions of? Well, us. Which meant all their questions were coming in by email on Sundays. So we either had to be in front of our computers all day Sunday or trying to answer questions from our smartphones while doing whatever it is we're trying to do on our day off on Sunday, which is really not ideal. Either because you don't have your materials with you while you're running around with your phones doing whatever you're doing on your Sunday, or you have to be, again, in front of your computer. So it's really not ideal to have that sort of set up. Also, there are some students, as I mentioned, who do want to come in and talk to you in person, and if you're not at your desk or in the library on Sunday, which most of us aren't, that's not a good setup for those students who do want to come and see you in person. And again, if there are tech issues, obviously, most of these companies will have 24/7 tech support, but if there's something in your library that you need tech help with and you're not there, again, Sunday's really not an ideal time to have the assignments due. So we had a debrief after our summer class, and one of the first things we decided is we're totally changing our schedule so that our final assignments are due on Monday nights instead of Sunday nights, just so that we are in the office on a regular weekday, so that all those last minute questions will come in while we're, during a regular weekday. We're going to set up a last office hours session on Monday, maybe from noon to 1 for those last minute questions, and anyone who wants to come in and see us will know that we're there on a regular weekday. And it just makes a lot more sense to have a big assignment like that due on a weekday than on a Sunday when we're trying to run around and have a weekend. So that's just something we learned kind of through experience. Not a good day to have an assignment due.
So in the interest of time, we're just going to fly through the next one.
The next two.
So don't clutter the course website. Talked about that a bit. Don't overuse video. If you make videos, keep them short. And
don't recreate. I was like, don't recreate your lecture. The lecture you do for your in-class. That was my main point. It doesn't work.
Don't forget student-to-student interaction.
That's you.
That's me? All right. Well, so for this, so as we said, this is one of the ABA requirements. And this can be difficult in the online format. As I had mentioned, I tried to get students to interact by posting on each other's Blackboard threads, and that wasn't all that successful. I mean, they would do it to get the extra points, but for the most part, it was the bare minimum. So this is a challenge, and I don't know if you two had successful ways.
I'll just say we've tried everything. We tried wikis, we tried blogs, we tried group projects, and the thing that we found that works well is having we post questions for discussion on a discussion forum. You're required to post two replies or two discussion, to the discussion topic, and then reply to somebody else's discussion post. So that gets the student-to-student interaction. Once we assigned a point value to it, it was great. Everyone participated, and we get really good discussion. So that's worked well.
And then finally, don't overestimate the amount of assigned work.
Initially, we were concerned about the ABA requirements that, a certain number of hours be done outside of the classroom to sort of mirror the number of hours you would have in class for a traditional standard classroom. But what we found is, what may take us an hour of work takes a student 3 hours of work. So we way overshot the mark, and the amount of work we assigned turned out to be a lot more than we thought. So think carefully about what you're assigning. And it was the number one complaint from our students is this is way too much work. Take that, of course, with a grain of salt, because students are always going to complain. But just think carefully about what you're assigning and how much time it would take you versus how much time it would take them. It's going to take them longer. So think about that when you're assigning work.
Okay, and then finally, the pros and cons of an online advanced legal research course versus the traditional in-person course.
So I've been thinking about this a lot. I'm trying to write a paper on, I want to make the argument that pretty much all advanced legal research classes should be taught online. And the first thing that I've been thinking about is the flexibility that online legal research or advanced classes provide. So think about the buzzword right now, the practice-ready law student. That's what we're hearing all the time. What does that entail, though? What does it take to make a practice-ready law student? They're doing clinics, they're doing externships, they're doing all sorts of stuff that's not on campus. So the world of the law student has changed. They're not on campus anymore. So the fact that we're able to provide a class for them that they can take that will help them with their internships and their clinics, and they can do it within the constraints of their work schedule, I think is a huge bonus and is something we should be doing. The second thing is efficiency. So what I notice in our classes, when we do a lot of hands-on work in our standard semester-long class, and it's always, you've got one student that's just like gets it, and they're there, they finish the exercise, they're ready to talk about it. And then you've got another student that's like, can you go back 3 screens and show me how you got to that database? So you've got one person that's, sitting around waiting, or maybe the whole class, waiting for someone else that doesn't quite get it. So it just creates efficiencies where the people that need to move faster can move faster, the people that need more time can have more time. I think it works really well for a skills type class like the classes we teach. The other thing, I think it's pedagogically very effective. So we have so much great word of mouth from our online classes. We always get people that take the class that say, my friend said I had to take this class. And the biggest thing that we get when we have our evaluations is this class should be required. Because we do sort of guided exercises every week. So every week they have a guided exercise that they have to hand in. And basically that's the equivalent of us lecturing in the classroom. Go to this database, click on this, do this. What did you get for that? Not rocket science, but it walks them through, and it's tactile. They're actually walking through and doing the research. And then we have exams. We have a midterm and a final where they're set loose, and they have to be able to use the skills they learn and then answer the questions. And the students do really well on that. It's amazing. I think they're amazed at how much they learn in that class from having walked through all these different things. So I think that hands-on format is very effective. And I think you've got the flexibility to add video if you need to. We don't do a lot of video, but I think more and more the millennial mindset is they like seeing things on video. But you have that flexibility to kind of, adapt to whatever learning styles are sort of emerging. The cons are the amount of time it takes. It's a huge amount of time to create all this material. It's a huge amount of time to grade. The availability. We are very available. We have to be, like Carrie and I, either one of us is on call on the weekends, and it's a lot of work. And then you lose that face-to-face interaction. And one of the issues, I don't know, if you read the comments in the newspaper, you get this, right? So sometimes people will just say anything when they're typing that they wouldn't say to you face-to-face. So you lose that face-to-face interaction, sometimes in a negative way, where it's like, okay, I've got to read this email again, take myself back a step. They're probably not saying such a nasty thing as I'm reading into it. But we had a great experience with this one kid that was just like nitpicking every assignment. We're like, oh my God, who is this kid? And then finally Carrie talked to him one time, and she was like, oh my God, do you know that guy? And I said, yeah. She's like, I talked to him today. I said, yeah. He loves this class. He was just like so into it that he was just, like every little piece of it, he was picking apart and like, this is great. So it's like you miss that out if you don't have that face-to-face interaction. So luckily she talked to him. The other thing is you have people that fall through the cracks. So we've had other students in the past where probably they shouldn't have taken an online class that was not probably the best suited for their learning style. But if you can catch them, you can help them. But the question is, can you catch them without having that face-to-face interaction? And then finally, and we've talked about this, the unpredictability of technology. That's always going to be an issue no matter what platform you use. And you can do things, to prepare yourself for that by, getting to know your technology support and getting to know the one person that can answer your question rather than just like going to the helpline. But overall, I just think there's a really good argument to be made for, migrating your class to an online class. I don't think you would go back.
Okay. We are at time. Does anybody have any questions for us? We're all ready.
About 2 minutes worth of questions. Oh, sorry.
The question is, well, I have a couple of questions. One is on the ABA Standard 306 about interaction with the students. It seems like the new version of the ABA standards kind of relaxes that. Are you talking more about how it was before, or do you feel like it still requires you to have lots of interaction between students?
This reflected the new version, which is definitely, it is more relaxed than the old, but does still use that language about faculty to student interaction and student to student interaction. But it is definitely more relaxed than the old standard, I think reflecting, the direction in which law schools are going, that they are moving into this online forum.
Can I ask one more question as well, just about, do your schools continue to have do you have still legal research classes that are done in person, or is it all online now?
I'm still teaching international and foreign legal research in person. And part of that, partly I just haven't had time to convert it because it is a huge time commitment to make these classes go online. And also with that, I feel in terms of the resources that are available for researching foreign and international law, I'm not sure. I feel like I use print materials more, and that's difficult to do then in an online course, unless I require students to go out into the library and use the printer.
And we're still teaching an advanced legal research class in the traditional class. It's a flipped class, so a lot of it is already, they're doing a lot of online stuff in that class anyway. But, you know, Carrie and I talk about transitioning that class into an online class fairly frequently, just to give the students that want to take it more flexibility.
We teach advanced legal research in California legal research in the traditional format. This was our first, the law school's first online course. As usual, they made the librarians be the guinea pigs. But I think we're going to head more in that direction. I'm just not sure when or which courses or what. The tax one will probably end up being all online at some point.
Questions. One, pass, no pass, or credit? And if it's credit, sorry, not credit, but graded, do you have to follow a curve? And then the other question was, do you have concern by doctrinal faculty members that this may be a wedge in the door as far as online for their classes as well?
I think our dean would love to see it as a wedge in the door, but like pushing them through the door to. There was a faculty meeting, not that long ago, where she was just like, if you want to flip your class, flip your class. I mean, the ABA, that's the momentum that's happening right now. So, I think the faculty, it's a good nudge in that direction. We were actually the first class at Seattle U that was an online class. And as far as credit goes, I don't know. I think everyone probably does pass-fail.
We're all credit, no credit.
Yeah.
We are graded,
Oh.
but it's not on a curve because we have fewer than 30 students. Which is part of why the grading takes so long. I assign A's, B's, C's. So, and everything has a point value, and yeah.
Ours is credit, no credit, but I give points to figure out if they get the credit, no credit, so I feel like I'm grading anyway. And I think our dean probably is thinking along the lines of eventually other courses becoming online, and we were just the first. We volunteered to go first, sort of. Not really.
And I think that Penny was talking about like making your presence known with publication, but this is one way that librarians are at the forefront. And Carrie and I are kind of the go-to people for people wanting to use Canvas or wanting to do online classes. So we gave a presentation to the faculty last summer about online, using an online learning management system. So I think it's a real bonus for you as a librarian too. I don't think you're going to get pushed back the other way for it.
All right. Well, thank you for sticking around.
Okay, we're going to have the giveaway now. Alana, if you want to come up and do that.
Again, many thanks to Vanessa and AALL for these. So our free membership went to Stuart Caton. So congratulations. Stuart is a MLIS student, so this is a really probably good gift for him. And the free registration goes to Louis Zimmerman. So, congratulations.
The people who do the most work for these conferences really are the committees, not the president. And so I want to thank Bonnie for all of her hard work in making such a good educational program. Thank Penny. And I know Alana has to return home to her 15-year-old dog named Xena. And when you get home, Alana, you've got to bring a toy back for your dog. So I got you a chewable buffalo. Thank you for an excellent job, Alana. Thank you.
Please make sure that you fill out the evaluations. I know several of the speakers were asking me for feedback, so.
Okay, I'll check what's in front of me as close as by. Thank you very much. You're welcome. Thank you. You try. That's always our goal. That's always our goal. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, we were interested. My director said.
That's a recycle pile. I think I picked up
Thank you very much.
And that panel, is that from
That's, no, yeah, it's from the, so I'll take it down.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's all over.
No, I come home tomorrow. Oh, okay. Tonight. I left. Oh, good. Okay. Oh, okay, good. Okay, that's excellent. Good. Yeah, nice. Thank you. Be good. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, well, you guys did a great job. Yes, one of you.
No, not yet. Everyone needs to have one. I know right now. We don't have this.
Thank you.
So the chance of us finding one.
Yeah, come safely and try, fix it.
Why don't I just meet you
My pleasure. Nice meeting you there. Safe travel.
You too.
Hey, more records. Ba 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 la la la.